Coming to you from a cozy little condo high atop Old Fourth Ward, Atlanta. Welcome to The Ron Show on America One Radio. Here's your host, Ron Roberts.
And a good Wednesday morning to you. Thank you for listening, whether it's on the America One Radio app, AmericaOneRadio.com, wherever you podcast, on demand at ProgressiveVoices.com as well. Cannot forget that. Thank you for listening. Last night, I'm watching Caitlin Collins on CNN interview former Senator from Alabama, Doug Jones, when this news broke.
Senator, I also got to ask you, because we just have some breaking news in that maybe people at home haven't been watching this race very closely, but it deals with our home state, and it's really important. And CNN is now projecting that the Democrat, Maryland Lands, is going to win this special election that was going on for a state House seat in House District 10. It's notable because she made reproductive rights a centerpiece of her campaign, something you don't often see in deep red Alabama. And she said in a statement tonight that Alabama women and families sent a clear message with this that is going to be heard in Montgomery, but also across the nation, and said they must repeal Alabama's no exceptions abortion ban, fully restore access to IVF, and protect the right to contraception. What does her win mean tonight for Democrats?
It's a huge win for Democrats. Look, this is a huge win for Alabama, not just for Democrats. This is a huge win for Alabama. It's a huge win for women who are going to be consistently pushing back on all the restrictive women's reproductive rights that we're seeing coming out of Montgomery these days. It's a win to push back on the culture wars. That's all that is being fought by Republican leadership in Montgomery. It's a win for people who want to work together for education, for jobs, for opportunities, and to do things for all Alabamians, not just fighting the culture wars. It's a huge deal, Caitlin, a huge deal.
So why don't we take this local? Let's go to News 19 out of Huntsville, Alabama for more on this story.
All right, thank you, Danielle.
Oh, no, actually, my name's Ron.
News 19, as always, your local election headquarters, and it appears we have a winner in the Alabama House District 10 special election. The Democratic candidate, Maryland Lands, and Republican Teddy Powell on the ballot today. Alabama Secretary of State has the unofficial results. Now get this, there was only a 1.85% voter turnout, and it looks like Lands took 3,715 votes.
Powell received 2,236, and there were 11 write-ins. This vote is necessary to replace former Representative David Cole, who resigned his seat after pleading guilty to voter fraud in October.
What? Yeah, so let me give you that juicy little story. Let's go back to the Associated Press. Listen to this is kind of funny. Former state representative David Cole pled guilty to a voter fraud charge that he rented a closet-sized space in a home to fraudulently run for office in a district he didn't live. That would be David Cole, a Republican from Huntsville, who pled to a charge of voting in an unauthorized location. The judge sentenced Cole to serve 60 days at the Madison County Jail. The remainder of a 3-year sentence was suspended. He will be placed on probation for that time, according to the terms of the plea agreement with prosecutors. Okay, but let's not distract ourselves from what is a pretty historic win and a huge 33 percentage point swing from Trumpy to now Democrat Maryland Lands winning that seat in the Alabama Statehouse.
News 19's Kayla Smith joins us live with the latest on the results. Kayla.
Well, I'm joining you live from a victory party tonight where everyone is very excited. This is Maryland Lands, and she is the new District 10 Alabama House representative. So thank you for being here and answering a question with us tonight. So tell me, it's day one. What are your plans heading into office?
Well, I am so excited to get down to Montgomery, and I think this is a giant step forward for Alabama. I think it's a victory tonight for women, for families, for Alabama in general. I want to get down there and repeal the bad ban on no exceptions abortion. I want to protect IVF and contraception, but I also want to be a champion for health care, mental health care, but health care in general. I really feel like we need somebody down in Montgomery who understands mental health issues, and I'm that one.
And how does it feel to be a Democrat elected into this role?
it feels like it's the start of a change here, and I think we'll see more change in 2026. I think Alabama is changing, North Alabama in particular, but other parts, I think we're ready for something different. We are tired of Alabama being 49th and 50th in all the key metrics. We can do better. We are better, and I want to make that happen.
So it's somewhat exciting anyway that you see an opportunity in a ruby red state. Alabama's nowhere near as purple as Georgia is. Purpley red, I think. But still, winning a statehouse seat in a reliably red Trump-favored district, even with low voter turnout, that's encouraging. And I say that because a lot of folks are going to say, well, 1.85% low turnout. Y'all, we're heading into a presidential election cycle where nobody's excited about either candidate. We could have a lot of low voter turnout scenarios in reliably red and reliably blue districts at the state and at the congressional level. What I find interesting, though, is that Marilyn Lands did not mince words. She wasn't half measured in her support for women's reproductive rights in 2024 in Alabama. In Alabama, y'all, and she won the seat. Now, I'm not going to sit here and suggest that heading into the 2024 cycle that we're going to flip a whole bunch of Trumpy red seats, in reliably red states. But I will say this, something that I try to remind Democratic candidates all the time when they're seeking the independent voter. There is this mindset in political science and really pervasive in punditry that the independent voter is somewhere between the left and the right. What if I told you that there are a lot of independent voters that are left of the left? What I guess I'm saying is, I believe it's often important that Democrats run as, Democrats, and run with the platform that the party has established. Because I've always believed that running from it is a capitulation to the hyperbolic drivel, the nonsense that comes from right-wing media and their pundits and their candidates and their politicians who try to label a Democrat as a baby killer. Does Marilyn Lands sound like a baby killer to you? I mean, she cited in vitro fertilization. That's sort of been a big topic in Alabama of late. And women who seek in vitro fertilization are obviously trying to have babies, to make babies. Yesterday, I began the show with a conversation I had with Melita Easters, executive director of the Georgia Win List. We were talking about the mifepristone case that's currently before the Supreme Court. And I don't know if you've noticed, but the Supreme Court doesn't seem to have much of an appetite for actually regulating this drug any more than the FDA already did some 20-something years ago. I asked Melita about the political implications, though, and if the Supreme Court has even taken that into consideration. You also spoke earlier about the potential impact on the 2024 race. It's hard for anyone to speculate, but with a 6-3 Supreme Court majority, there may be some wiggle room for a justice, I guess, maybe one or two tops, to consider that and it shouldn't happen that way, but you have to think it's going to be a consideration when you've got 3 Trump appointees on the bench and he's running for re-election. He's been notably quiet on this case and has actually sort of backtracked and tried to remove his fingerprints from the Dobbs decision.
He's tried to remove his fingerprints from this case. He's also tried to say that he would enact a national abortion ban at 16 weeks, I believe.
Right.
So he's trying to backtrack the damage he's done because he sees how this is impacting his own race and down ballot races. And what we're seeing on the Democratic side of the aisle is record-setting number of women who have qualified for office. Mm-hmm. Now, in some cases, some of these women are running against each other in Democratic primaries, but we see that women are highly motivated by the prospect of getting themselves elected to restore reproductive freedom in states like Georgia, where there's a 6-week ban, and to fight for continuing to protect reproductive freedom in states where abortion is still legal. So it is a major factor in suburban, highly educated districts where women are in the middle and motivated to restore the access to medical care that they enjoyed for the last 5 decades, because they don't want to see their daughters and granddaughters forced into back alleys for illegal procedures that can be dangerous and are not medically safe. And while women of privilege can usually travel to a state where abortion is legal, they realize that so many are not able to do so. And this is a really big problem. My favorite phrase for what happened when the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade was that all of a sudden the Chihuahua caught the MARTA bus.
Yeah.
And the Republicans did not realize the furor on the other side, which they had unleashed.
And the thing about that is the Dobbs decision occurred so far enough away from the 2024 cycle that there is at least the thought, maybe it's not prevailing, but there is the thought on the right that maybe enough time has passed, dust has settled, and that cooler heads will prevail, or that the sting from that has been blunted. But now again, we have the mifepristone case coming up on the Supreme Court docket here. And as you mentioned, a decision could be levied, the ring pulled from the grenade and lobbed before they walk out the door. So it may have a lasting impact going into the 2024 cycle.
Oh, it absolutely will, because in most states, qualifying for the 2022 election cycle, which, the November votes were after Dobbs was overturned, but qualifying occurred before the Dobbs decision was final. There had been a leak, but so this 2024 election cycle is the first qualifying period when women who were outraged by the Dobbs decision could qualify to run for office. And what you have to remember is that since Dobbs was overturned, in every state where abortion was on the ballot, through ballot initiatives or in candidates who were facing off against each other with abortion as a deciding factor, abortion has won, because the majority of this country, in almost every poll you see, approves of women having the autonomy to make their own medical decisions.
By golly, the lady was right. Melita Easter's hat tip to you. Okay, so yesterday wasn't a great day for all women. Ronna McDaniel had a job and then she didn't. Got to weigh in on this because the folks on the right. Hilarious. Stand by. By the way, if you'd like to hear the entire conversation I had with Melita Easters yesterday, good news, you can listen to it anytime you like at ronshowatl.com. You can also like and subscribe, follow The Ron Show on whatever podcast platform you prefer to go to listen to podcasts. Oh, I'd love to be added to your list of podcasts. That'd be amazing. Thank you so much. Follow the show at Ron Show ATL on your preferred social media platforms as well. Thank you so much for listening. We appreciate that. Last night, interestingly enough, I'll read from NBC News, Elizabeth Chuck reporting on itself, NBC News reporting on itself anyway, that it is cut ties with Ronna Romney McDaniel, the former RNC chair. Elizabeth Chuck reporting, NBC News has reversed its decision to hire former Republican National Committee chairwoman Ronna McDaniel as a political analyst after network executives faced a chorus of fierce on-air criticism. Here's the thing. All the pundits on the right are just apoplectic. How could they do this to her? Oh my gosh, do they not want to hear from conservative voices? Just complete vitriol from the right about NBC's decision not to hear from voices on the right, despite the fact that Joe Scarborough has the morning slot, the former Republican congressman. The former RNC chair, Michael Steele, frequently on NBC News and MSNBC. This is the same Ronna Romney McDaniel that they believed was to blame for all of their losses. So they fired her, but are apoplectic that anybody else thought to fire her. This is Rachel Maddow from last February, by the way.
Heading into the big Republican Party meeting this weekend, it seemed like the national chair of the Republican Party might be thrown out of her job, too. And, that makes sense just from a 30,000-foot perspective, even if you knew nothing about her, right? If you don't want to blame the party's electoral woes, since Donald Trump first came on the scene in 2016, if you don't want to blame the party's electoral woes on him, well, she would be the obvious other person to blame as the chair of the Republican Party during that time. I mean, Donald Trump became president in January 2017. He named her, Ronna McDaniel, to be the chair of the Republican Party in 2017. In her first election thereafter, in 2018, the Republican Party lost 40 seats and lost the House. The Republicans that year lost the popular vote in those midterm elections by the largest margin since the 1980s. Then in the next election, in 2020, the Republicans lost the White House and the Senate, as well as the House that they had previously lost. Trump and Ronna Romney McDaniel managed to lose both chambers of Congress and the presidency in a single term, which is the first time that had happened since Herbert Hoover. Then next election, 2022, with Ronna Romney McDaniel still in charge at the RNC and Trump still effectively leading his party from the sidelines, the Republicans turned in a performance in the 2022 midterms that was the worst performance by a party not holding the White House in decades, arguably in a century. Even in 2023, last year, off-year elections, Democrats did unexpectedly well in elections in Virginia and Kentucky and Ohio and every single darn place that held any sort of referendum on abortion rights after Trump-appointed judges overturned Roe versus Wade.
And last night in Alabama.
And now it's 2024. And Trump is very much still in charge. Yeah. And 3 swing state Republican parties and counting are in total meltdown, but you're not allowed to blame Trump for any of that. And so heading into the Republican Party's meeting, big annual winter meeting this weekend, these were the headlines about the Republican Party chair. MAGA Republicans rage at Ronna McDaniel over RNC failures. We've got to blame someone. Yeah. Let's throw her out.
Yeah.
Ronna Romney McDaniel did seem to survive the RNC's weekend meeting. At least it seemed that way when things wrapped up at their big meeting on Saturday. But then on Sunday morning, Trump went back on Fox and said about Ronna Romney McDaniel, quote, "I think she did okay initially in the RNC. I would say right now there will probably be some changes made." So he's saying he wants her out. Now he's just done another interview with another right-wing network where he said that she should be out of her job. He was asked, quote, "Is it time for Ronna McDaniel to step aside?" He responded, "Well, I think she knows that. I think she understands that." Trump now put out a statement this evening saying that he will make his pronouncement on her fate later this month after the Republican primary in South Carolina.
Trump supporter, Prager University head Hugh Hewitt just apoplectic on Fox News yesterday about NBC News deciding to cut ties with Ronna Romney McDaniel, who Donald Trump and the RNC cut ties with just a month prior.
Well, Ronna is a friend, and I did work for NBC, and in November I worked with Caesar and Rebecca and the whole team. I've never seen anything this brutal since I got started in media in 1990. Ronna is going to sue everyone who defamed her for breach of contract, for intentional infliction of mental distress. They are going to sue for the destruction of her business opportunities that come from being on TV. I think they made a terrible decision, and they allowed the MSNBC bleed to take over their network, and the cult has taken over the news division, and it's going to hurt the 74 million people who voted for Donald Trump are not going to watch NBC News.
That's Hugh Hewitt telling you that Ronna is going to sue everyone that defamed her. Is she going to sue Donald Trump? Do you think while serving as RNC chair at the whim of the then president of the United States, Donald Trump, that maybe she might have suffered from
intentional infliction of mental distress?
And this guy wants you to believe, by the way, that it was her brief stint at NBC News that caused
the destruction of her business opportunities,
but not this lukewarm walk back endorsement.
I think she did okay initially in the RNC. I would say right now there'll probably be some changes made.
Listen, I'm not here to endorse Ronna Romney McDaniel for anything other than what she already has displayed herself to be, an enabler, lacking in spine. But then again, most Republicans in the era of Trump are too. Ted Cruz got walked all over, his wife disparaged, and he just licks boots. Lindsey Graham emasculated constantly by Donald Trump. Lil Marco Rubio, also emasculated by Donald Trump. They all support and or wholeheartedly endorse his candidacy for president of the United States. Ronna Romney McDaniel is no different. She just got to be the fall person when it was time to blame someone other than the obvious for their party's woes. But she's inherently the person that NBC News should definitely hire to give a conservative viewpoint of the current makeup of the Republican Party in their minds. I'm sorry, it's just hard to take these folks seriously. Hey, it's our job to fire her. Why'd you fire her? We absolutely think she stunk at her job here, but it's absolutely wrong that you fired her. How dare you? As I keep watching these election results, all I can say is keep doing what you're doing, guys.
Broadcasting 5 days a week to make common sense common again. This is The Ron Show on America One Radio.
Absolute tragedy what happened at the Francis Scott Key Bridge in the Metro Baltimore, Maryland area. Late Monday night, early Tuesday morning. So I'm just doing my thing yesterday, scrolling through Instagram, killing some time. I literally had 12 minutes between work and like 2 softball league Zoom calls. So I was enjoying my 12 minutes scrolling through Instagram, and I stopped at this reel that The Daily Show had put together, and the top half of the reel has a Fox Business, Maria Bartiromo doing her thing, and then they had below that half their caricaturization of a Fox News control room. And I thought, okay, let me watch. The Daily Show makes me laugh, ha, ha, ha. And so, again, let me set the stage again. Fox Business, Maria Bartiromo in the top half, and The Daily Show putting on a little play of what the Fox News control room would look like below.
A little bit. I'm going to figure out how to get... Yeah, actually, hold on.
It sure
hey.
is. Let me also...
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out how to make this about, like, Biden somehow, like, Biden's bridge crisis, like we did with the border. Like Biden's border crisis. I mean, we could just go with border. Why don't we just make this about the border? No, honestly, Maria's pretty good at that. Maria, can you just make it about the border? Just like find a way to get border in there somehow? But don't do it in an obvious way. Just do it like a... Okay, yeah.
I think of course, you've been talking a lot about the potential for wrongdoing or potential for foul play given the wide open border.
Nice. That's great. Oh my God, she's the master. No, that was all her. That was all her, honestly.
Securing this border. The president says he's not going to take his...
So, okay. I mean, what do? The Fox News folks characterize themselves. Laura Ingraham yesterday somehow turned the bridge situation into distrust in government and the DOJ being weaponized against former President Donald Trump. I kid you not.
Many years ago, kids were taught the story of the boy who cried wolf. I'm sure you were taught it. And we're supposed to take away the lesson that lying is a mistake because the time will come when you need people to believe that you're telling them the truth. Turns out many of our leaders never learned this lesson. And now, no matter what they say, no how credible they may want to seem, huge portions of the country won't believe them.
I'm sorry, this is Laura Ingraham talking about people not telling the truth and wondering why so much of the country doesn't believe them. Laura Ingraham on Fox News, the same Fox News that got slapped over election denialism. Hundreds of millions of dollars in suit. The same Laura Ingraham that was texting the White House when Trump was in office during the insurrection. That Laura Ingraham. Wow. I mean, I can't see below the anchor desk that she's sitting at, but what a pair of stones on that lady.
And when they wonder why this is, they should look in the mirror. And that's the angle. Joining us now is Missouri Senator Eric Schmitt, who serves on the Senate Commerce, Science, and Transportation Committee. Senator, is there anything the administration can do at this point to make most Americans trust both their explanations and their handling of what is a nightmare for the United States with this bridge collapse?
Yeah, let's remember, she's talking about a bridge collapse here. That's what this was all about, a bridge collapse, and it had something to do with what?
Well, I think the first thing is to make sure that the families of those who are missing know that all of America is pulling for them and praying for them right now. It's a tragic.
Does he know that they're from Central America, by the way?
Accident and something that I know this is something that should pull us together, and you need leaders who are focused on that. And my hope is that we would come together, Republican, Democrat, to make sure we're doing everything we can to support those families and get the people of Baltimore and commerce up and moving again, right? This is a very important port. But to your point, the problem here is this is the consequence, this sort of distrust of terrible leadership. When you have an administration that has weaponized the Department of Justice, tried to throw in political opponents in jail, tried to throw them off the ballot, conducted a vast censorship enterprise to silence Americans who don't buy into their narrative, whether it was on efficacy of masks or transmissibility of COVID after you've had the vaccine or the Hunter Biden laptop. I mean, time and time again, Laura, these folks have viewed half the country as the enemy, and they're willing to try to silence them under any means necessary. And we're right to be distrustful of this administration because of their past actions.
This is about a bridge, y'all, and they're making this about, first of all, the lack of self-awareness on their part is incredible. The weaponization, the lies, the media narratives on Laura Ingraham's Fox News Channel prime time. Oh, but wait, there's more. Eric Bowling on Newsmax had author Victor Davis Hanson on. What the hell his expertise is in architecture, I have no idea. But listen to this.
Exact relation to cause and effect, but we do know this, that the world is much more interconnected. It's much more fragile than it ever has been. It's much more sophisticated, and it demands an ever greater level of expertise. But just at the time that we're building bigger and bigger and more dangerous ships, or we're assembling longer and longer trains that derail, like we saw at East Palestine with more and more toxic, we're not upping our game as far as increasing the level of expertise and especially, Eric, meritocracy. So we're not hiring necessarily the best people. We used to say we're going to hire the best people regardless of their color of their skin, their sexual orientation. Now we're saying, well, we may hire the best people, but more importantly, is their ideology or their ethnicity or their gender or their sexual orientation. And unfortunately, it's exactly the wrong time to do it, because it's a much more dangerous, interconnected world. And when you have a foreign company doing this with a foreign crew, and we don't know what our people were doing, but you're just risking the chances that something's going to go wrong.
So we're blaming diversity, equity, and inclusion now on a ship that lost control of itself running into a bridge and toppling it? DEI is to blame? Thank you, white guy, for that explanation. I mean, when the host, Eric Bowling on Newsmax, had to chime in afterwards to say, I want to make sure we don't blame this bridge situation on DEI hiring because clearly it was a mechanical error on the ship. What does that say about Victor Davis Hanson? You got corrected on Newsmax. Okay, let's hear from someone serious about this. Who's not. It's Looney Tunes land over there, man. President Joe Biden yesterday.
The bridge is also critical for travel, not just for Baltimore, but for the Northeast Corridor. Over 30,000 vehicles cross the Francis Scott Key Bridge on a daily basis. It's virtually, it's one of the most important elements for the economy in the Northeast and the quality of life. My transportation secretary is there now. As I told Governor Moore, I've directed my team to move heaven and earth to reopen the port and rebuild the bridge as soon as humanly possible. And we're going to work hand in hand with the support of Maryland to support Maryland and whatever they ask for. We're going to work with our partners in Congress to make sure the state gets the support it needs. It's my intention that federal government will pay for the entire cost of reconstructing that bridge. And I expect the Congress to support my effort.
Oh, hell, he's got to get Congress involved in getting this bridge rebuilt? Oh, God, sorry, y'all. You start buying kayaks, get a ferry, because that bridge ain't getting built anytime soon. Well, it's going to get tied to something that will not pass muster, and sorry, no new bridge. Oh, and by the way, to bring this closer to home, Representative Mike Collins from Jackson, Georgia, tweeting almost 24 hours ago as this show airs, that Baltimore obviously won't rename the new bridge after Francis Scott Key again. So any guesses on the new bridge name? Talk about some lobbing of red meat. For those who don't know, Francis Scott Key, who wrote the Star-Spangled Banner, the national anthem, was a slave owner. And also in the lyrics to the national anthem, well, not the one that we all sing, before sporting events, but the subsequent verses that we don't actually sing before sporting events references slavery. So, no, obviously, if you're going to rebuild a bridge, what's the point in naming it again after Francis Scott Key when that becomes a controversial topic, especially for the residents of the city that the new bridge will serve? But why is Representative Mike Collins from Georgia deciding to weigh in on that? And is he going to make that an issue when Congress is called upon to fund the bridge? I'm just saying, put a pin in that. Watch. We'll see what becomes of that. Maybe nothing. Maybe nothing. But what do you think? Incidentally, for a little background, the national anthem hasn't always been our national anthem. Let me read from the Washington Post a little bit here. The longer version of both the song and the story of the man who wrote it reveals not only why it has become controversial now in this season of racial reckoning, football, and presidential campaigning, but why it was too controversial to become the national anthem for more than a century after it was written. First, a few things to know about the War of 1812. One of the main issues was the British practice of impressment, the forced conscription of American sailors to fight for the Royal Navy. Plus, and get this, the British promised refuge to any enslaved black people who escaped their enslavers, raising fears among white Americans of a large-scale revolt. The final provocation was that men who escaped their bounds of slavery were welcome to join the British Corps of Colonial Marines in exchange for land after their service. As many as 4,000 people, mostly from Virginia and Maryland, escaped. The Washington Post continues, it's important to know these things because the Star-Spangled Banner, originally called The Defense of Fort McHenry, was more than one verse. The second half of the third verse ends like this: no refuge could save the hireling and slave from the terror of flight or the gloom of the grave. And the Star-Spangled Banner in triumph doth wave, or the land of the free and a home of the brave. These lyrics are a clear reference to the Colonial Marines, according to Jefferson Morley, author of Snowstorm in August, Washington City, Francis Scott Key, and the Forgotten Race Riot of 1835. They are clearly meant to scorn and threaten the African Americans who took the British up on their offer, he wrote in a recent essay for the Washington Post. Key surely knew about the Colonial Marines, and it's even possible he saw them among the contingent of British ships that sailed into the Baltimore harbor. And by the way, let me credit Gillian Brockwell for writing this piece in the Post back in the year 2020. She continues, even if these lyrics aren't meant to be explicitly racist, Key clearly was. He descended from a wealthy plantation family and enslaved people. He spoke of black people as, quote, a distinct and inferior race and supported emancipating the enslaved only if they were immediately shipped to Africa, according to the aforementioned Morley. Now, I get it. This was the 17 and 1800s, and it's not as if Francis Scott Key was all that much different than many other white Americans of the time. I say all this to say I don't know why Representative Mike Collins, Republican, white guy, from Jackson, Georgia, is opining on his Twitter X handle about what the residents of Baltimore might want to name the new bridge to replace the Francis Scott Key Bridge. I don't know why he's openly opining about this, why he wants to know, or he's curious what the residents of Baltimore might want the bridge named instead of Francis Scott Key, given Key's history and the national anthem's history. But I will point out, by the way, that according to the most recent census data, Baltimore is 62.5% Black or African American and only 31.9% white. It would stand to reason that elected leadership of that city, in coordination perhaps with the state and the federal government, might think twice about adorning Francis Scott Key's name on a bridge that serves that city in 2024, going into, it'll probably take several months, 2025, to fully rebuild. And wouldn't that be the responsible thing to do? Wouldn't that be what best serves the residents who will be using that bridge to think twice about naming it after someone who saw African Americans, who saw Black people, I should say, as an inferior race? Well, of course it would, but this is a critical look at America's history on race, and we know Republicans don't enjoy that. Thank you for listening to The Ron Show, whether it's on the America One Radio app, AmericaOneRadio.com. If you podcast, we appreciate that. On demand at ProgressiveVoices.com. You can follow the show if you'd like at Ron Show ATL on your preferred social media platform. On the Twitter X platform, Darren Givens, who is co-founder of Thread ATL, you can follow him at ATL Urbanist. Shared a Atlanta Business Chronicle article behind a paywall, so I'm not reading the whole thing either. He tweets, as he shares this article, owners of several restaurants that appeal to wealthy Atlantans who love their affluent bubbles are opposed to a new public transit route. See, I would say, Darren, why would you say new public transit route? Because it's not. It's been day one in the planning stages for the Atlanta Beltline. Anyway, new public transit route, and instead want to maintain a problematic but lucrative status quo. He shares the article, which features some restaurateurs, but also in the photo of restaurateurs, there are also some, problematic people. Let me read the caption of the photo. Restaurateurs and other business leaders who are against rail on the Atlanta Beltline, including Jordy Garnson of the Icebox, Walter Brown, president of Better Atlanta Transit, which does not mean Better Atlanta Transit, Bob Amick of Concentrix Restaurants, Matthew Peterson of the Old Fourth Ward Business Association, Michael Lennox of Electric Hospitality, Kevin Rathman of Kevin Rathman Steak and KR Steak Bar, Ann Kramer of Coke's Curry and Associates, Louis Jeffries of Lingering Shade Social Club, and Mike Green of Portman Holdings. Now, I'm not going to suggest, as some have on Darren's thread where he shared this, I'm not going to suggest that their voices don't matter. They are locally owned businesses. They have increased the quality of life along the Beltline and in the Old Fourth Ward. There's some fantastic businesses there. I like Lady Bird. Can't say that I've the money to eat at Kevin Rathman Steak, but maybe one day. Two Urban Licks, all good stuff. Lingering Shade Social Club, fantastic place. They have contributed to the success of Old Fourth Ward and the Beltline, no doubt about it. However, in real estate, we call it buyer beware. When you buy a place and are unaware that a highway is going to be built behind your backyard, well, that's your fault for not knowing that. The problem is none of those folks opened these establishments along the Beltline unaware that transit was coming. This is just kind of one of those deals where, well, we didn't anticipate just how popular the Beltline was going to be in its initial conception, and now wonder if the rail component might take away from the success. And I can't even blame them for that, but they're kind of being very short-sighted about this, if you ask me. And I'm going to give you an example of how they're seemingly unaware how light rail transit along the Beltline actually helps them on days when the weather ain't glorious and you don't have folks in shorts and tank tops jogging and meandering along the Beltline. The Instagram account, It's Our Atlanta. We've had the fellow behind that, Blake Schultz, on the show. This is fantastic. This is just a prime example here. Listen to this.
This is the Beltline in front of Ponce City Market at 7:30 on a Friday night. The area surrounding Ponce City Market is home to 10,000 people per square mile, and yet a little bit of rain and it's dead. Our community and our businesses deserve better. We need a streetcar on the Beltline.
So, what you don't hear, obviously, because this is an audio show, is that the Beltline, you could have shot a cannon. You could have shot side by side 8 cannons down the Beltline and not hit a soul. There was one fella who was kind of jogging by in the rain. God bless you, dude. Your health really matters. Nobody else was on the Beltline because it was raining. And yet the streetcar would actually get folks to and from those businesses that I just rattled off a list of, even when it's raining. Brenda Squirrel tweets in Darren Given's thread here, the city needs rail, but not on the Beltline. To which I say, good news, it's not on the Beltline. It's running alongside it, as has been the plan from day one. I would advise anyone, by the way, Brenda included here, that next time you're on the Beltline, look at the weedy overgrowth beside it. That's it. That's where the rail's going to go. And it's not even going to be like, that what you see from walking along train tracks, the gravel and rock and blah, blah, blah. No, it's going to be like low grass with the rail right there, with the occasional passing by of a pretty quiet streetcar. Please go downtown and just sit by the streetcar one day when the weather's nice. Just find a nice little spot and sit on a bench or something and just listen to the streetcar as it goes by. You're not even going to notice it. Brenda continues, the entire Beltline is hellish gentrification. Why waste money on a train to get rich people who'd rather walk or scoot from tapas bar to artisanal soap shop instead of putting the money into MARTA lines? Well, here's the thing, Brenda. It gets residents to Kroger and TJ Maxx, as well as retail and restaurant employees of all those stores and eateries. And it's also cheaper than new MARTA rail that we're nowhere near close to getting anyway. Brenda wants to double down, though. Which residents does it get to Kroger or TJ Maxx? Well, me, for example, I live right here at Freedom Parkway and Boulevard. I take the path to the Beltline. In fact, I do this quite often when the weather's nice. I take the bike and a backpack. I go to Kroger. I get my things. I come back. It's good exercise. There are plenty of people who live along the Beltline. And by the way, what did she say here? People who live in $4K a month, 1-bedroom apartments on the Beltline don't take MARTA to TJ Maxx. Well, no, because it doesn't get there. There's not a TJ Maxx near the Beltline, she says. Absolutely wrong. Right across from Ponce City Market on Ponce de Leon Avenue is a shopping center where there's a Whole Foods, a Home Depot, a pet store, I forget which one it is, and, oh, by the way, a TJ Maxx. And incidentally, I don't give a shit if rich people aren't going to use mass transit. I really don't. I don't. Let them do what they're going to do with whatever they decide to do transportation-wise. That's fine and well. But don't sentence the rest of us to being stuck in gridlock to get to and from our necessities and or our jobs as a result. We live in a state where the minimum wage is $7.25 an hour still. Actually, I think it's less than that, but the federal is $7.25. There are people that have to get to those retail jobs who'd like to live in Old Fourth Ward. You talk about gentrification being hellish. Well, yeah, it is for folks who can't afford to live here. So let's work on the affordable housing part, but let's also make it affordable by having viable mass transit instead of needing as well a car payment and insurance. And oh, by the way, pay to park. Yeah, that's a thing, especially in Ponce City Market. I'll share this Twitter, X, whatever we're calling it, thread from Darren Givens and let you weigh in on it as well. And if you have the Atlanta Business Chronicle account, you can read the article behind the paywall that speaks to these businesses that are inexplicably against a service that will help their business when the weather isn't fantastic. That's going to do it for The Ron Show. Thank you so much for listening on the American One Radio app, AmericanOneRadio.com. Replay 5 to 6 p.m. today and on demand at ProgressiveVoices.com and via podcast whenever. Show notes at RonShowATL.com. Have a great one.